He thought playing fair would protect him. No screaming matches, no ugly custody fights, no dragging anyone through the mud. Just a clean, respectful split, or so he believed. He agreed to the terms she suggested, gave her space, moved out of the house just to keep things calm. He didn't lawyer up right away, didn't push back. He wanted to show that he wasn't the kind of man who turns divorce into a war. But by the time he finally stepped into court, it was already too late. What he didn't realize, what most men don't, is that in divorce, playing nice isn't always noble. Sometimes, it's the fastest way to lose everything. You don't hear people talk about this part. The slow, quiet unraveling that happens when a man tries to be cooperative in a system that doesn't reward it. He's told to be civil, told to compromise, told to be the bigger person. And so he does, not knowing that every step he takes toward peace is being used against him behind the scenes. This isn't a rant about bitterness. It's not about hating your ex. It's about understanding what really happens in court when you walk in with good intentions and no defense. Because in the eyes of the law, being peaceful doesn't make you powerful. It makes you vulnerable. In this video, we're going to expose the truth behind one of the most common and most dangerous tactics men use during divorce: staying quiet to keep the peace. You'll learn how this approach, while well-meaning, leaves many men powerless when it matters most. Stay with me until the end, because what you don't know about this process can, and often does, cost men their homes, their kids, and their future. Let's get into it. He thought mutual respect would carry over into court. After all, they weren't enemies. They'd shared a life, raised kids, built memories. He figured if they kept things mature, the legal part would reflect that, two adults calmly dividing what needed to be divided. He didn't expect any tricks. No games. Just fairness. But divorce court doesn't run on respect. It runs on leverage. It doesn't matter how civil you are if the other side is more prepared. It doesn't matter how fair you try to be if the legal system isn't built to reward fairness. And it's not. What happens instead is cold, calculated strategy. Lawyers don't argue about who is kinder. They argue about what's in writing, what's been filed, and what you've already agreed to, even if you didn't understand what it meant at the time. Meanwhile, the man who wanted peace is sitting in silence, confused by how quickly the tone has shifted. He can't believe some of the claims being made. Can't believe how the same person who once thanked him for being understanding is now using his calmness as a weapon in court. Because here's the brutal reality. The side that's more assertive, more aggressive, often gets what they ask for, not because it's right, but because they made the first move. And by the time the peaceful partner wakes up to what's happening, the damage has already begun. But it gets worse. He thought leaving the house was the respectful thing to do. Tensions were rising, emotions were raw, and he didn't want the kids caught in the middle. So he packed a bag, told her to take the space she needed, and left, figuring it was temporary. He didn't realize that walking out the door wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a legal move, one that would come back to haunt him. Because in the eyes of the court, leaving the marital home can look like abandonment. Not just of property, but of your role as a co-parent. Judges don't ask why you left. They look at what happened after you left. Who stayed in the home with the kids? Who maintained a routine? Who took over the daily responsibilities? And if it wasn't you, that becomes the new status quo. Now she's the primary caregiver. You're the one who visits. The parenting schedule starts to lean in her favor. Your claim to the home starts to fade. All because you tried to avoid an argument. And here's the kicker. You're not just giving up physical space. You're surrendering legal ground. The longer you're out, the harder it is to get back in. Re-establishing equal custody or financial claims becomes a steep uphill battle. And most men don't even realize they've lost that battle until months later, when the temporary becomes permanent. You thought you were being considerate. The court sees you as absent. And the consequences of that one move, they're just beginning to unfold. He told himself it was just temporary. The custody schedule wasn't ideal. The child support number felt high. But his attorney said, "Let's not make waves right now. We can adjust it later." So he signed the temporary orders. He figured once things calmed down, they'd revisit everything. Nothing was final, right? Except in divorce court, temporary has a way of becoming permanent. Judges don't like to disrupt what's already in place, especially when it comes to kids. If a parenting schedule is working well enough, they're reluctant to change it. And if child support has been paid at a certain rate for months, that number starts to feel like the standard, not the placeholder. The court doesn't ask why you agreed. It just sees that you did. And now, when you try to argue for a 50-50 schedule or a reduction in payments, you look like the one who's changing your mind, even if the original terms were rushed, one-sided, or made under pressure. You're the one who's suddenly disrupting stability, while she's the one maintaining consistency. That's how the system works. Men often don't realize the weight of those early agreements until they're trapped by them. The judge sees a pattern. The paperwork confirms it. And reversing course becomes an uphill battle you were never warned about. All from something you were told would be just for now. And that quiet decision, to avoid conflict and keep things smooth, might cost you years of lost time, money, and presence in your own family. But it doesn't stop there. He didn't keep records. Didn't think he needed to. They weren't fighting. There were no threats, no accusations, just conversations. Agreements made in texts, casual promises exchanged in the kitchen, nods during phone calls. He trusted that the tone would stay the same, that their history would speak for itself, that if anything ever got messy, the truth would be obvious. But family court doesn't run on memory. It runs on proof. And the person who documents everything, the texts, the receipts, the calendar entries, the missed pickups, is the one who controls the narrative. Not because they're more honest, but because they have evidence. Meanwhile, the man who tried to keep things informal walks into court with nothing but his word and finds out it's not enough. She shows the messages. She outlines a timeline. She paints a picture. And because he didn't write things down, didn't screenshot the conversations, didn't email confirmations, he has no way to challenge it. Judges don't dig through emotions. They look at details. It happens quietly. A single text taken out of context. A bank statement misinterpreted. A forgotten date used to question your reliability. And suddenly, you're not the cooperative, supportive partner you thought you were. You're the inconsistent one, the unreliable one. All because you assumed that being respectful meant you didn't need a paper trail. But in divorce, silence isn't strength, it's a liability. And once the record tells the wrong story, correcting it can feel impossible. He thought the court would see his side. He wasn't perfect, but he'd always provided. Stayed loyal. Put his family first. When things got hard, he didn't run. He worked harder. He figured the judge would recognize that. That years of sacrifice, late nights, coaching Little League, making birthdays special, that would matter. But it didn't, because family court doesn't operate on character. It doesn't reward good intentions or loyalty. It doesn't weigh how much you gave, how many times you bit your tongue, or how hard you try to hold the family together. It operates on filings, on testimony, on who showed up with the stronger case. And too often, that's not the man who stayed quiet. He walks into court thinking the truth will protect him. That fairness will rise to the surface. But that's not how it works. The judge doesn't know your story. They only know what's presented. And if the other side paints you as absent, controlling, emotionally distant, or financially unstable, and has the paperwork to back it up, you're not walking in as the man you see in the mirror. You're walking in as a stranger defined by someone else's version of you. That's the punch in the gut most men don't see coming. They believe that being reasonable, calm, and dependable will naturally be recognized. But court isn't a moral scale, it's a chessboard. And if you're not playing to win, you're just waiting to lose. Because by the time you realize the system isn't designed to measure what's fair, it's already moved on without you. And that leads to the final, most painful mistake of all. He felt guilty. Not all the time, but in the quiet moments when the house was too quiet, when the kids asked questions he couldn't fully answer, it crept in. Maybe he'd failed. Maybe he could have done more. Maybe walking away, even when things were broken, made him the bad guy. And guilt is powerful. It doesn't just sit in your chest. It shows up in your decisions, especially during divorce. So when it came time to settle, he gave in. Let her have more than she asked for. Didn't fight the alimony number. Agreed to less time with the kids, thinking it was just for now. Told himself he was doing the right thing, that overcompensating would make things smoother. That maybe if he gave enough, she'd see he still cared about doing right by the family. But divorce isn't a place where guilt earns you grace. It's a place where concessions become expectations. The more he gave, the more was assumed. The settlement became lopsided. His future finances took a hit. And worse, we tried to renegotiate months later, to fix what he thought had been a temporary gesture. The court didn't see it that way. They saw a man trying to change a deal he already accepted. Because once a deal is signed, guilt doesn't get a refund. And here's the cruel twist. The kindness he thought would bring closure only locked him into a life he never agreed to, but legally couldn't escape. All because he mistook self-sacrifice for strength. And in doing so, gave up far more than the court ever required. He thought keeping the peace would protect him. But by the end, it cost him everything he'd hoped to hold on to, time with his kids, a fair share of what he built, even his ability to move forward without resentment. And he's not alone. This is the quiet pattern unfolding behind closed doors across the country. Men walking into divorce, thinking that cooperation equals protection, and walking out stunned by what they've lost. Let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with wanting a peaceful divorce, wanting dignity, wanting to avoid a war. But there's a difference between being civil and being silent, between compromise and surrender. Because the court isn't looking for the nicer spouse. It's looking at documentation, leverage, legal positioning, and the men who give up ground early, who move out, agree to temporary terms, settle out of guilt, and skip documentation, often never recover that ground again. Here's what this all comes down to. You can be fair, respectful, and emotionally mature, and still protect yourself. The two are not opposites. You don't have to go to war to stay prepared. But if you walk into this process trusting that fairness will be automatic, you're putting your future in someone else's hands. And no matter how peaceful things feel now, once lawyers get involved and court papers get filed, the tone can shift fast and permanently. So if you're facing a divorce, or know someone who is, don't confuse being cooperative with being unarmed. Because once the process begins, the system doesn't pause to wait for you to catch up. And by the time you realize what you've given up, the door may already be closed. Stay smart, stay aware, and never mistake silence for strength.